we're confronted with a situation today that requires our immediate attention. We simply can't wait much longer to address these real issues that are confronting us today of the impossibility of continual growth. We need to recognize the fact that the growth of the past 200 years, particularly the last 100 years, has been supported by an abundant source of relatively accessible and cheap fossil energy, and we've used up roughly half of the supply by most estimates during that period of time. And we're using it at a faster rate all of the time because of the booming economies in the rest of the world, particularly in India and China and places like that. And we simply can't continue to grow at the rate that we've been growing in the past. So we have to look for alternatives to fossil energy as a source of energy to support growth in the future. But at the same time, we need to confront the reality that all of these sources are going to be less abundant. They're going to be more expensive in economic terms and in real terms in terms of the sacrifices that we have to make in order to bring those resources forward. When we begin to look at the issue, for example, of the depletion of oil, we're either at or very near a peak in oil production globally. And from here on out, we're not out of oil, but we're going to have less energy, not necessarily year after year from oil, but over the long run, there's going to be less and less oil available, and it's going to be higher and higher in prices. So we can expect to hit the wall in terms of the amount of energy available to support economic growth. Every time the economy starts to spurt forward, then we can expect it to be knocked back into another recession by the lack of available energy. So we have to confront this issue, and the sooner we confront it, then the easier it's going to be to adjust to a new world in which energy is less available and more costly. And as we turn to alternative sources of fossil energy, particularly with respect to coal, we run head on into the problem of global climate change, because those are just two symptoms of the same basic cause. Because every calorie of fossil energy we use releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Those gases, those elements were collected by plants millions of years ago when that fossil energy was stored in the earth. So when we use the energy, those chemicals, those greenhouse gases go back into the atmosphere. And coal is particularly problemsome when we talked about global climate change. So we can't confront just switching from one source of fossil energy to the other. And when we switch to wind and water and photovoltaic cells and biofuels and things of this nature, and we should look at all of those possibilities and all those options into the future, but we need to realize that in order to have a sustainable source of future, then we have to fundamentally rethink the whole concept of where energy is coming from and how our society is organized, how our economy is organized. And we've got to move to much more decentralized systems of energy where we have local biofuels and local electric systems and local windmills and things of this nature, and a grid that's decentralized as opposed to centralization. We don't have to have continual growth in our economic wealth in order to have progress in our happiness, in order to actually move forward to a fundamentally better world, where people have a greater sense of satisfaction and well-being day to day in their lives. And it comes from the realization that's becoming increasingly apparent in a whole body of research that says beyond some fairly modest level, increases in wealth do not bring increases in happiness and overall well-being. Beyond some fairly modest level, in fact, when they look at countries around the world, when countries get to the point where there's about $10,000 to $15,000 per person, per capita income, beyond that point, there's no relationship between wealth and happiness. Beyond that point, it has to do with our quality of our relationships within families and within communities, and a sense of being treated equitably and just within the communities and within the societies in which we live. And it also comes from a sense of purpose and meaning of life, the realization that what we're doing, or the belief that what we're doing is right and good. And so we can move forward to a world where there's no limit, there's no claim on energy from working on our relationships with other people so that we get along better within communities and we have more equitable and just societies, and where we have a greater sense of purpose and meaning of life, primarily realizing that we have a responsibility to those people of the past who built the foundation for our society and our economy that we can only repay to those people of the future. You know, people tend to be concerned about this new world when we talk about a world in which there will be less or no economic growth or material growth as we go into the future. They're concerned that we have to have continual growth in order to avoid situations where we have unemployment like we're in today. And we say what we do about that, we typically think of growing our way out of it. For the past 200 years of the industrial era, we've been focusing on technologies that employed fewer people in the process of producing greater and greater output. If we simply shift the focus to technologies that employ more people productively in rewarding occupations in producing the same amount of output, then we can have an increasing population. We can have more people employed and employed better in the process of producing the same amount or the smaller amount of output, even year after year. While I've talked about the fact that we can't continue sustained growth in economic output, I think we also have to face the fact that we can't continue to sustain increases in population. I think we have enough resources in the day today, if they were equitably distributed, that we could certainly have a decent level of living where everybody in the world would at least have the opportunity to find happiness, because it doesn't require as much material well-being as we have today. But at some point, if we allow the population to continue to increase, or if we choose to continue to increase the population, we simply use up the resources of the earth. I've concluded from experience over the years that people only change when you have three conditions in place. First, you have to conclude that what you're doing isn't working and it isn't going to work in the future. I think we've done a pretty good job of that in terms of sustainability. It's risen to the public awareness, and if you ask the question of sustainability, the answer inevitably is we simply can't continue doing what we've been doing. A lot of people don't want to ask it, but when they ask it, that's the conclusion they come to. But that's not enough for change. The second thing is we have to have some idea of what we could do that would actually make our lives better. Because if we don't know what to do instead of what we're doing, it's too easy to just keep on doing it. And so we have to paint a vision of the future, that possibility, which I think is a realistic possibility, that the world can be fundamentally better in the future and we can live better lives in the future after we confront the reality of the lack of sustainability as to where we are today. And the third thing you have to bring about change is that people have to believe that it's possible to get from where they are today to where they would like to go in the future. That possibility is what gives them the hope. Basically, hope is not the expectation that something is going to be quick or easy, or that you know that it's going to be successful. It simply means that there's a possibility of something better. And when you realize that what you're doing isn't working, that there's an alternative that's better, and that you might possibly be able to make that change, then you have the three essentials to bring about the change that we need to move to that fundamentally better world of the future.
Please come back and watch complete interviews with each of the experts. And you can join me, Tom Hartman, anytime on the web at tomhartman.com.